This week's portion is Emor. Pashas Emor comes from Leviticus. We're going to be starting in the 23rd chapter of Leviticus. And we'll go 23 to the end. And we hope to get through the end of this portion. Because the first part of this lesson is really, it has a very important message that we can learn for the period that we're in. Sometimes when you read in the Parsha, and it goes through and it lists all of the feast and all the Moedim, the appointed times, it just seems to be a retelling of the appointed time, just a reminder. But there are things that the sages point out in this text that is really interesting and very much applies to us in the 21st century. So we'll start by reading chapter 23, Vayakra, Leviticus, the 23rd chapter, verse 1 of 23. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, Hashem's appointed festivals that you are to designate as holy convocations. These are my appointed festivals. These are my appointed festivals." And from verse 3 forward, you see he talks about Shabbos, he talks about the Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the festival of Matzos, Pesach, etc. He just goes right through, and each time there is this sort of phrase that you see, "And this day shall be a holy convocation to you, and do no laborious work." There's a story that is told of a king who travels to the far distant part of his kingdom with his son. And about the time they get in a wilderness, what do most children do when you're on a road trip somewhere and there's not a gas station in 150, 200 miles? What do they say? "I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I need to go to the restroom," right? Well, the king's son says he's thirsty. So the king stops his whole entourage. All the horses come to a halt. His captain of the guard comes up from the front, backs in, "King, what is the problem?" He says, "My son is thirsty." And he says, "Well, what do we suggest we do?" He says, "Well, let's pull together our council and find out what a good solution." So the primary council came together and they suggested, "King, we have several options. One would be to take our finest horsemen, our finest horses, and send them up ahead on an excursion to try to find water for your son, for the little prince. And then the next option would be to dig a well and get him water." So the king says, "Dig a well." So they establish a big derrick and drill a hole in the ground, and it takes them the whole day to hit tap water, water at the vein some 100 feet down. Water springs up, they feed the boy the water, and then someone said to the king, "I just don't understand. I mean, there would have been many easier ways to get water for your son besides, tapping into the ground in this labor for 8-hour day to give your son a cup of water. Why?" He said, "Well, this water isn't for just my son. This water is for everyone who will pass through my kingdom in this wilderness. They will be able to draw water out of this well. This is not just for my generation, my son's generation, but his son's generation and his son's generation and many generations after." If you're familiar with GPS systems, and especially the older ones, the newer ones now, I think in the cars, don't have a thing called waypoints, do they? Do they? I don't think they do. Well, in the old days, in the military, we had what we'd call waypoints. We'd set waypoints. In travel, you would go from point A to point B, and the old GPS systems, you would have to set a waypoint. It didn't navigate like the newer systems today. And those waypoints provided a place for you to sort of regather yourself and establish the next waypoint. Israel's journey in the wilderness was truly a journey marked by momentous, amazing events in which Hashem came to them, fed them manna, gave them water in the desert. There they saw the miraculous. Their shoes didn't wear out. They didn't grow hungry. They saw the Shekhinah of Hashem come down on the tabernacle. Amazing. We look at those stories in hindsight thinking, wow, that's amazing. They saw the true glory of Hashem. They saw the glory of Hashem. And they experienced it firsthand. Boy, what would it be like to be there? But what we're reminded of by the sages is this listing of the text that Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying to the children of Israel, say to them Hashem's appointed festivals. They are to designate as holy convocations. Why? Because Israel dug wells in the wilderness, we now drink from the waters. Mm-hmm. Because Israel planted themselves in the desert and touched and experienced Hashem in that unique way, we now in the 21st century can find ourselves from one waypoint to the next, to dust off the old well cover, to look at the ancient text and its description of how you should open the well and draw the water, and how you should make sure that you prepare the well for the water, and how you should make sure that before the next season, before you move on from this well to the next, that you cover it properly and document it properly and prepare it for the next generation to come along. Why do we study Torah? Do we study Torah because we're bored and we don't have anything else to do? No, that's not at all. We all have plenty of things to do. Do we study Torah so that we can become more religious? No. I mean, people can get confused with the whole term, you know, are you religious, not religious? But the whole point is this. We're not doing this to become more religious. There are plenty of cults, plenty of religious experiences you could have all over the world, right? I mean, my goodness. Just throw a rock in Houston and you can find some brand of religion that you could participate in. But why do we study Torah? We study Torah because Hashem has a fountain of living water that flows from the great understanding of His modim. We've understood it, and it may have taken some of us a little time before we recognize it. But every one of us, at some point, it was like the light went off, and we realized, oh my, the Creator of the universe has appointed times and feast not only for His people, and not only for His people at the beginning of time when Israel was just an infant in the wilderness, but also for His people today and for the people of the nations to connect to Hashem in a special way. So whether it's Shabbos and you're sitting at the house by yourself with your spouse, hopefully your children are around, but in our case it's just my wife and I many times, and you light candles and you break bread, it's not just lighting candles and breaking bread. You're dusting the old well off. You're tapping into a source that Hashem has provided for you and I. We just came through Pesach and we all enjoyed the time that we had together at Pesach for the great grand meal that we had together. But it's not about the meal. It's about the fact that we can sit at a table with 200 people from the Jewish community, but we're sitting collectively at a much grander scale. Because it wasn't just 200 people there at that meeting, but it was the many thousands of souls that have done that since Sinai, sat with us for Pesach. The many thousands of souls. Because when we do Pesach here, what do you think is happening in the Shemaim, in the heavens? Same thing. Yep. The same thing. When you break bread at Shabbos, what do you think is happening? What do you think is happening in the heavenlies? Somewhere in the heavenlies, somewhere in the divine mystical realm, there's a pause in all of creation for Hashem's holy day, and you're joining it. Why are these days so special? It's not just a list of 5 days, Pesach, counting the Emor, you know, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Yom Kippur, the Sukkot. It's not just about listing out a bunch of events, but it's like taking an old ancient map with the greatest treasures and where they're located. Remember as a child ever wishing you could find a treasure map? Having the iconic X on the map, right? Just wish that you could find that treasure map. And you go out and find a treasure. And sometimes as a kid I would go out and just dig, hoping to find something, even though I never did. But you just hope to find something. I mean, even today as an adult, I have a metal detector and I want to go out and find treasure. That's an exciting thing. But think of the treasure that has been downloaded to the physical dimension for us, called the Modim, the appointed times. What are the appointed times? Hashem has set his calendar and said, you want to meet me? This is where you meet me. You want to engage with me? This is where you engage. We can't make up our own times. We don't make up our own feast. We do his feast. Rav Nachman says this. Merai HaKodesh, or holy festivals, literally means proclaiming the holy. For the festivals are associated with miracles that reveal divine will. Each Pesach recalls the miracles of the 10 plagues, the exodus from Egypt and the splitting of the Red Sea. Shavuot recalls the revelation at Sinai with its accompanying miracles of thunder and lightning. Sukkot recalls the miraculous clouds of glory. Each festival proclaims and announces divine will. When we observe the festivals, we proclaim the holy, revealing God's providence and sovereignty, found in Lukuti Maharan number 2. Some of us have probably done this, but at least we know there are individuals here who know other people that are like this. They're always looking for that one-day event, right? They're always like, one day I'll be rich, one day I'll get married, one day I'll have a nicer car, one day I'll have a better job. They live their whole life one day, right? Someday. And even within this community, we have individuals who think, oh wow, one day I'll reach a place of holiness. One day I will draw down the glory of Hashem and I will have understanding, to my greatest ability. One day I'll be, Mamashia, like truly understanding Torah like I never have understood Torah before. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? We all want to have some goals and vision in mind. But in reality, now is the day of holiness. Now is the day of holiness. Not tomorrow, not next year, not another place, now. I love this verse that we often quote. Hashem speaks to Moshe, to the people of Israel, saying, these laws and precepts that I've given you are not too hard for you. They're easy. They're not in heaven, so you should draw down some great angelic being to teach you these great things, or travel to the farthest parts of the sea to call a great prophet to come speak and share with this. This is so easy. It's where? On your lips. It's on your lips. It's easy. So how do we draw down holiness in the 21st century? How do we make our lives holy? How do we experience Hashem like the people of God did at Sinai? By remembering and attending and participating in the Moedim and the appointed feast. That's what this is about. This is about tapping into that source. One of the things that they say, if a person gets lost in the woods, one of the worst things that they can do is what? Continue moseying around the woods trying to find their way out, right? Sometimes they say, look, if you happen to find yourself back where you were before you started, park yourself and get a signal. Find a way to let people know where you're at. Because the worst thing you can do is just keep walking, because you could probably never be found. At least if you're where you're at, you know, if you stop where you're at and make a marker, then someone will be able to find you. There's another thought that is found in the Likutei Moharan that says that a person will find Hashem where they left him. The person will find Hashem where they left him. What does that really mean? Have you ever prayed and not felt like you were achieving anything? Have you sort of went through the motions? Your mind was like somewhere else? Then after it was over, you thought, that was kind of useless. I don't even know why I did that, right? Whenever you find yourself not fully engaged and not fully appreciating the Moedim, not fully engaging in this connection with Hashem, it's time to, the old phrase, it's time to punt. It's time to pull yourself back and go to the place where you left Hashem. Find out where you left it. Where did you? Where was the place that you truly connected to Him? Where did you connect with Him? Was it your first study of Torah, pure just reading the text? Was it listening to hours of great teaching from great sages? What was it? Whatever that was, it's time to go back and find. That's where Hashem's at. Sometimes we get so caught up in the practice of our relationship, we forget that this is about a relationship. None of us who have successful relationships in the human sense could ever think that we could get away with doing all the mechanical things in a relationship without the commitment of the heart in a relationship. Do you think that your partner or somebody would figure that out after a while? Of course they would. You know, you can bring a cup of coffee and not have feeling about it. Right? You can fix someone a meal and be completely disengaged emotionally from that person in the meal. How many times have we even experienced that in our own relationship when someone's upset or angry with us and they go to set a meal before the table and they kind of sit at the table and they walk off? It's like, ooh, what was wrong with them? So what are we talking about? How does that relate to our relationship with Hashem? If you pray, say at night before you go to bed, you pray it, you say Shema, and commit your soul to Hashem. But you're doing it sort of half distracted, not paying attention to what you're doing, maybe mess up the words that you've spoken. It's time to stop, regroup, and re-say it with intention. Why? Because it's as if you never said it. It'd be like laying in bed at night with your spouse or leaving to go to work the next day, and instead of the normal routine, sweetheart, I love you, I'll see you, have a safe day. You just walk out the door and you shut the door. And as you're going out the door, you mumble something. That's a big difference, isn't it? And the intention is you were too distracted to actually connect to your spouse before you left. So why are the Moedim so important? Because it connects us back to the heart of Hashem. Let's continue on with a few of these things from Rav Nachman. When he says the holy festivals literally mean proclaiming the holy. You must proclaim the holiness of the festivals in order to draw their sanctity toward you. You should proclaim them. The Sanhedrin has the responsibility of declaring when the festivals will occur. Our sages derived this from the old word otam, or them, which can also be read atim, you. This is to say, the sages of the generation are the ones to declare the festivals. Now, if you're very familiar with many movements out there, or religious movements, there are the Karaites, who only believe in setting the feast by the new moon after the barley harvest, right? So literally there are people in Israel that will go in the Karaite community and they'll wait for the barley harvest to come, and once the barley is ready to harvest, then the first sliver of the new moon will be the beginning of Nisan, right? And it's the beginning of Nisan, of course, would kick off Pesach. Well, in many cases, Pesach is either before or after the calendar one that's set in the normal Orthodox Jewish calendar. Are you guys aware of that? Yes or no? No? Well, it's a fact. They do that. And they do that because they believe that only Hashem declares what the day of the beginning of Nisan should be, which is actually the beginning of the calendar, because he said, this shall be the beginning of what? Months. Right. And if that's the beginning of months, how are the beginning of months established? Hashem said how it would be established. Well, the problem is with no temple. The problem with the diaspora, people all over the nations. How are the people of the nations going to know when the barley harvest is in Israel? You wouldn't know. So the reason why is the Sanhedrin established a date system, a way of establishing when the first of Nisan would be. And obviously they added the leap years, and we could have a long class on the calendar and how it was developed. But the whole point is this. In this community, we support the idea that within the framework of orthodoxy, and until Mashiach comes, this is the way it's going to be. Now, you're going to have those who are going to be doing their own thing, like the Karaites and whomever else is out there. But until then, we are attaching ourselves to the orthodox concept that it is the Sanhedrin that establishes it, and that is what the large body of Judaism does to observe the feast. And there will be those probably who are not connected to Judaism, or maybe Karaites, who would probably argue that with me at this point and disagree. Okay? And I want you to understand that there are those out there that just because you and I follow the calendar that is on the Orthodox calendar, they don't do that. And the reason why they don't do it is because they are following a system that they feel is much more of a purist approach. But at the same time, we're in the diaspora, we have been exiled, we don't have a temple, and until Mashiach comes and straightens it all out, this is just the way it's going to be. Okay? But nevertheless, it doesn't make the appointed times any less important. All right? So we got to remember that. Okay. The festivals are called Mikra'i Kodesh because they proclaim the holy. The miracles that God performed for the Jewish people, however, it is impossible to hear these proclamations through the Tzaddikim who reveals God's greatness and infuse them with faith. Because the festivals depend on the Tzaddikim or the righteous, one who honors the festivals can receive light from the Tzaddikim. In addition, because the person feels an affinity to the Tzaddikim who are characterized by the trait of humility, he too attains humility. And what they're saying is this, is the Tzaddikim are the righteous ones who have lived throughout history and who have guarded and sanctified these very holy days. That when we observe these days and we attach ourselves to the activities of those days, we are also attaching ourselves to the Tzaddikim who have observed those days. And at some level, we also attain the same level of holiness. It's like, here's the best way to describe it. When you do challah, we break off, the ladies will break off a piece of challah, right, and set it aside. And what's that piece broke off for? Do we know?
Burnt offering.
Right, burnt offering, but it's also to be separated out for Hashem, correct?
Right, good
right.
Blessing.
And so it is the small portion that is separated that makes the whole holy. You follow? Mm-hmm. So the small portion that is presented to Hashem makes the whole portion sanctified and holy. You follow? So in the same way, though on every Shabbos that you make the challah and you break off the piece and you sanctify that to Hashem, it makes this as if it is Hashem's offering as well. It makes it just as holy as that little piece that is presented. So does the Tzaddikim throughout history who have sanctified, set apart themselves and became at the highest level of righteousness. Their righteousness infuses into the holy days, the Moedim, and when we observe those holy days, we also begin to elevate ourselves and begin to obtain that same level. Why? Because when the part is taken off and presented to Hashem, it is holy, it makes the whole holy. Does you follow through? Okay, wanted to make sure. These are the appointed times that you should proclaim as holy festivals. Do not read otam, them, but atim. You refers to the Sanhedrin. This is what is declared in verse 2 where it says, I'm sorry, in verse, and you shall say to them, right? These are the appointed times that you should proclaim as holy festivals. What is being said here is that this is referring to the Sanhedrin. Even if the Sanhedrin errs in its calculation and declares the new moon, or even if it declares the new moon unintentionally at a wrong moment, its declaration stands. That is found in Rosh Hashanah 25a. The sanctification of the festivals depend on the sages who set the calendar according to the appearance of each new moon, as we were talking about before. The declaration of Rosh Chodesh, and by the extensions, the dates of the festivals, was given over to the sages of the generation. Even if they err in their calculations, and even if they intentionally schedule the festival for a different date that seems to be the norm for that month, from here we learn the importance of having faith in the Tzaddikim, or the righteous ones. Even God, who is certainly aware of the true date of the new moon, will accept as festival a date that is set by the sages. Are you understanding what I'm saying? And this, at some level, answers the Karaites' sort of disagreement as to setting the date by the Sanhedrin. And the whole idea is that God knows the date. That's important. We as human beings are not going to be held culpable for what we don't know. At the same time, the Karaite would say, well, no, now we're living in a modern time. There's no reason why everyone shouldn't know the barley harvest and the new moon in Israel. We have the technology to do it. The problem is this, is until that is accepted as a whole by the Sanhedrin, by the large body of orthodoxy, then that is something that we trust Hashem for. So what makes the date holy is that we observe and find that day to be holy. We elevate that day. Let me go through a couple of more things. Okay, just as the first of Nisan is the beginning of the year, we are going to see, according to what is spoken of here in Likutei Moharan 1:30, verse 5 or section 5, that the feast, the three festivals that come up in the fall, become sort of the heart of the whole year. So let me read this. The initial letters from the word Eile Mochodei Yud He Vav He, these are the appointed times of God. That's what it means. Spell Aleph Mem Yud, or Ima, my mother. This is a reference to the Sephriah of Binah, which corresponds to the heart. You know, mom is the heart thing, you know. It's
the understanding.
The understanding, correct.
Binah.
Very good, Binah. So, you know, moms have this special sort of understanding. They have this heart. They have this genuineness about themselves. Thus, this verse implies that the heart of the year is to be found in the three festivals. Because the heart is the seat of joy, the festivals, too, are times of joy. And we are commanded to ascend to Jerusalem for the festivals, to appear before God, Exodus 23:17. Through the joy that a person attains in the festivals, he can ascend spiritually to draw vitality directly from the face of God. Now, when you think of Yom Kippur, do you think joy? What do you think? Vexing, repenting, fasting, right?
Judgment.
Judgment. It's Kind of hard to think of it in the context of joy. However, on the other hand, a righteous person sees the interaction of Hashem in their lives, the quote-unquote judgment, as being a very joyous event. Why? Because Hashem loves us like a father loves a son. He chastens whom he loves. Right? So, what would be the most disturbing is to approach Yom Kippur and not have Hashem engage you in your life. That would be scary. Now, yes, there's fasting. Yes, there's contemplation and the whole thing. But in reality, that is a very joyous occasion to approach the throne room of God's presence and say, I'm here, we are here as your people. Now we're asking you to give us another year in which you bring blessing and bring prosperity into our lives. Let's move on past this and go to I want to go to the end. Chapter 24. Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, command the children of Israel to take to you clear olive oil pressed for illuminating, to kindle a continual lamp outside the partition of the testimony in the tent of meeting. Aaron shall arrange it from evening to morning before Hashem continually. An eternal decree for your generations. On the pure menorah shall he arrange the lamps before Hashem continually. Here you have some gentle reminders of the people's responsibility to maintain this very physical light that represents also a connection to Hashem's divine essence and light in the world. Where is the menorah located in the Mishkan? In the holy place. The holy place represents the seat of our human psyche and emotions, right? The holy place. The Holy of Holies is the place where the divine essence of Hashem lives in our life. But the holy place is where we get our psychological faculties, our thinking, our conversation, our laughter, our joy, our prayers ascend from that level, right? So the concept is that there is a reminder to the people and to also us in the 21st century that we, though there's not a Mishkan, we have to maintain within ourselves a positioning of a light of Hashem that we maintain. It's the responsibility of the people and the priest, actually. The people bring the oil, the priest maintain it. Was it the responsibility of Hashem to keep that light going? No, it wasn't the responsibility of Hashem. Was it the responsibility of Hashem to press the olives? No, it wasn't Hashem's responsibility. It was the people's responsibility. Why is it the people's responsibility? Because we realize that we actually participate in God's divine essence radiating from our life. How do we participate in God's divine light shining in our life? By mitzvah. By doing righteous acts. By pressing in, sort of doing that extra part of that labor. You know, many people have accused us of saying that we try to buy our salvation. That comes from people of other religious views. Say that you try to buy your salvation because you're trying to, be good to be saved type deal. What they don't understand is that the greatest blessing that Hashem gives humankind is the ability to participate in their relationship and connection with Him. We get to participate by maintaining divine essence and light in our lives by doing mitzvah. What kind of mitzvah are we talking about? We're talking about mitzvahs of kindness, of charity, mitzvah of justice, showing justice in the world, all kinds of great things. Okay. Last but least, I would like to go down to let's go to verse 13. Someone read for me, loud and clear.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the blasphemer outside the camp, and let all who are within hearing lay their hands upon his head, and let the whole community stone him. And to the Israelite people speak thus: anyone who blasphemes his God shall bear his guilt. If he also pronounces the name of the Lord, he shall be put to death. The whole community shall stone him, stranger or citizen. If he does thus pronounce the name, he shall be put to death. If anyone kills any human being, he shall be put to death. One who kills a beast shall make restitution for it, life for life. If anyone maims his fellow, and he has done so, shall it be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The injury inflicted on another shall be inflicted on him. One who kills a beast shall make restitution for it, but the one who kills a human being shall be put to death. You shall have one standard for the stranger and citizen alike, for I, the Lord, am your God.
Very good. Let's pause there. The list of items here start off with the blasphemer, and it goes through, actually there are other laws before that, but this one deals with the blasphemer. It talks about one who strikes another human being, puts him to death, etc., etc. Then it says that there is one law for the stranger and for the people of Hashem. What one law is he talking about? He's talking about this set of civil laws that are described here. That anybody living in the land, anyone connected with the people of God at that time, were held to the same standard. So it was improbable that there would be injustice toward a stranger. If you lived in another nation close to Israel, even to this day, if you're not a citizen of a particular country and you go in, there's no guarantee that you're going to have any rights. Unlike this country, a person who comes in, you actually are allowed to have the same rights that a regular citizen has when it comes to trial. It's an amazing, amazing deal. That is where it comes from. This whole idea of a stranger that is in your midst, if something happens unjust to a stranger, you're not allowed to treat him as a stranger. You should treat him with the same level that one who lived within the camp would be treated. Therefore, if some injustice took place for a stranger, there would be appropriate actions that would take place against the person that did something to that stranger. So, remove the blasphemer outside the camp, and all those who heard shall lean their hands upon his head. The entire assembly shall stone him. Who's the entire assembly? The entire assembly. Is that all the people of Israel? No. It's the entire assembly of the judges, the ones who've heard him blaspheme. Which is very important, because you have to hear him do it to do it. Right? Now let me ask you, could somebody go to the judges and say, I heard this guy blaspheme? No. Didn't work. Even if you had 3 or 4 people say, I heard him blaspheme, the problem is the people who stone him are the ones who are going to have to hear him blaspheme. So this is a person who's not just hit his fingernail with a hammer. Okay? This is a person who's completely spoken against and blasphemed not only the name of God, but his Torah and his commandments. And that person was to be stoned, taken out of the camp and stoned. Anybody have any comments on that before we move on?
You could also say the reason why they put that first before the laws, before an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, is also telling you that you don't have the right just to go stone him because you heard him blaspheme.
Correct. Very good. That's a very good point. I like this here where it says, and the children of Israel you shall speak to, saying, any man who will blaspheme his God shall bear his sins, or blaspheme his God shall bear his sins. He gets to bear his own consequences for what he does. That's what it means. And one who pronounces blasphemy, the name of Hashem, blasphemily the name of Hashem shall be put to death. The entire assembly shall surely stone him, proselyte, native alike. When he blasphemes the name, he shall be put to death. One of the reasons that we so carefully guard the sacred name of God is because of this text. Now I realize if somebody says the sacred name of God, they're not blaspheming his name. You understand that. We don't believe that. But at the same time, we want to guard it. Just want to make sure that we go the extra mile to not blaspheme. A man, if he strikes mortally any human life, he shall be what? Put to death. A man who strikes mortally an animal's life shall make restitution for a life. And if a man afflicts a wound of his fellow as he did, so shall be done to him. A break for a break, an eye for an eye, a tooth for the tooth. What does that mean? Get to poke their eye out?
You have to pay restitution.
No.
Cuts their fingers off? No, why can't we be like the Muslims in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia? And there's a park, and in the park's a big old block of wood that you can see has been hacked over years, where they've lobbed off hands and finger joints and feet and stuff like that. It's part of their justice system. Once again, without the knowledge of Torah, a rudimentary or just a basic understanding of Torah will lead you to bad understanding of God and what He wants in our lives. So the idea is eye for an eye, tooth for tooth is about financial restitution. It's about restitution. We have that same system here, right? So we learn that these beautiful laws are also found in our society today. So in closing, let me say this. What we take away from this chapter, or from this parsha, Emor, is that the feast and the holy days that God has given us, these appointed times, are days to be proclaimed holy. How do we proclaim them to be holy? We proclaim them to be holy by observing them, by participating in the greater community of Jewish faith, and experience our relationship with Hashem. Making them holy is about doing it with intention, is about approaching it with intention, not incidentally, accidentally, but with pure intention before Hashem. And in making those days holy, according to the commentary that we read in Rabbi Nachman's Torah, that in making those days holy, we attain the holiness of the Tzaddikim before us, who have made that holy, who have made that special. All the way from the time of Moshe to the time of today. When you participate in Shabbos, when you participate in the holy days that are coming up, and here we have Shavuot in the next couple of weeks, when you participate in those things, you are connecting to the holiness that is assigned and attached to it. So that concludes the class, and everyone say shalom.
Shalom.